So I would love to introduce Lara Meadows, Vice President at Threat Connect. Lara, the floor is yours. You're on mute.
There we go. I kind of wish we were scheduled right during happy hour because I think this crew would be appropriate for that. So again, as James said, I am Lara Meadows. I am the Vice President of Threat Connect, working in cybersecurity for many, many years now. And when James first asked me to talk about this or to moderate this panel, I jumped at the opportunity. Coming from a large organization, going to a much smaller one, this topic resonates really well. And I was excited about the content. And then I got to meet the guys and was even more excited. So before we jump into this, I do want to do a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, DemoStack. If you all are familiar with DemoStack, it is a demo platform that allows you to take control of your demo environment, actually pull it out, run it internally so that you have full control of it. It allows you to create custom demos, build best practices, standardize your demo, and just improve your overall quality of your demos, which as SEs we know is a big part of our life. So having a tool that can help us with that is huge. So if you're not familiar with DemoStack, definitely check it out. Okay. So let's jump into it. So what I want to do is introduce our panel. And like James said, we've got two characters, John and Todd, who actually know each other, I think, from the past and have a great relationship. So what I'm going to do is let them each introduce themselves and then talk about why this subject was important to them. So John, you want to go first?
Absolutely, Laura. Thank you for the introduction. Everybody, thanks for joining us here today. Hopefully, as we wind things down after the last couple of days, we end on a high note, and Todd and I don't let you down there. But no, I'm John Pullen. I run sales engineering globally at a company called Calibra. I've been lucky enough to be in the sales engineering space for 25 years now. I just actually realized that. I did the math today and it scared me. I started off at a startup called Netscape. A lot of people probably never even heard of that company. It no longer exists. But I'm lucky enough now today. I've had stints at Salesforce for a long time with Todd. Fantastic experience. Tibco, and a couple other organizations as well. So really excited about this topic today. And I will hand it over to Todd.
Thanks, John. Todd Janzen, Vice President of Q Branch. For those that have never heard of Q Branch before, I'm not surprised, but we're basically an agency within sales. And where the name comes from, if you've ever seen the James Bond movie, you know that's where Q Branch is, where Bond goes to get intelligence, and back in the old days, a gadget or something to do the mission. But it's a perfect metaphor for what we do here for sales. We are the team of developers, video, UI, UX, making the high fidelity assets so our sales teams can go close the big deals. So just celebrated 17 years at Salesforce and excited to be here today.
Awesome. So let's start by just asking the basic question. What is an organizational foundation to both of you? John, you want to go first?
Sure. So think of an organizational foundation is, if you're thinking about building and building, a great analogy is establishing the foundation there. Anything you do above and beyond that is dependent upon the strength of that foundation. Within that foundation, at a building, and this is actually an analogy we used at Salesforce years ago, Todd, remember about the platform? You've got an infrastructure, you've got shared components that are going to be used throughout the life and structure of that building. If you're in a high growth organization, or if you're in any organization, I can't stress enough the importance of establishing that foundation. That foundation is, think of the things for your organization as the pillars of your organization. Establish that. Establish roles and responsibilities. Make sure those are set up well and defined. Because the last thing, probably the most important thing I'll do is, when should I really start? Question asked: when should I really start thinking about establishing an organizational foundation? Best way to answer that is a year from now, you wish you had started a year ago, right? Todd, I'd love to hear your perspective on an organizational foundation.
Yeah, I love analogies and metaphors. And I'm looking at the mountain range behind you. So I guess I'll just go with this one. But, why do you do it? When you're a startup and you're kind of just getting out of the gate, think about what we're asking our sales teams and our pre-sales professionals to do. You're kind of asking them to go from the valley floor to the summit of Everest every single time. And so, why it's so important is if you're doing it right, you're kind of dropping them off at the base camp just below the summit. And you're just allowing your professionals to kind of like summit all day, every day. And so that's just to play off your analogy, John. I mean, I think that's why you do it.
Awesome. And John, you mentioned that there's pillars. That's a critical part of building that foundation. So when you're looking at the pillars, what do you think they are? And then why do they each matter?
Yeah. So the way I look at it, and so when you're establishing an organization for scale, right? It's easy to break it down into a set of components that sound really basic, but really are not, right? Number one, first and foremost, think about standardization for both process and data, right? Make things that are repeated throughout that hiking process, like Todd was talking about over and over again, easily consumable and reusable. So standardization. Number two is flattening of the organization, right? If you are in part of an organization where, think of it, here's another great analogy. So Todd and I are sitting in two rooms next to each other. There's a wall between us. I need to talk to Todd, right? But for some reason, the building was designed, I have to climb up 4 flights of stairs, go across the door there, down another 4 flights, and now I can talk to Todd. Break through those barriers by flattening the organization. And it doesn't have to be just structurally and role-based, but do it with collaborative tools. So get everyone cross-functionally talking. So that helps flatten things. Last but not least, the one that I really believe in greatly is accountability, right? Accountability on a personal level, at a team level, at an organizational level. And accountability can really only be established with authority. So if you want to ask somebody to be accountable for something, you've got to give them the authority to actually make those decisions. And equally as important with that, the ability to fail and fail fast and not be punished for that. So another component there is, if you're going to measure anybody on any metric, be transparent about that, right? And also, as you're explaining and sharing those measurements and metrics, always include the why. Why is this relevant? Why is this important? And what is this going to do for us? So those are my 3 pillars that I kind of run things by for scale: standardization, flattening of the organization, collaboration, and structurally, and accountability.
And Todd, what are your pillars?
Yeah, there's kind of, I think it has a lot to what I've done here at Salesforce. So, it's going to be a biased answer here, but when I think about scale, I really think about demo environments is kind of first and foremost. And it's something I started thinking about early in my career here at Salesforce, and kind of that, like, how do we not make everyone start from the valley floor? Like, let's at least get them to the base camp of Everest. And so for me, scale really starts with demo environments. And as we were prepping for this session, we kind of talked about this, but if your solution engineers, your pre-sales professionals cannot spin up a demo environment with a few clicks within a few minutes, like, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Like you gotta solve for that, and you gotta solve for that fast. And I think at Salesforce, we've been blessed because the free trial was part of the platform for day one. It was built into the company. And so I think, for those that are kind of looking for some tactical things, and again, I'm biased because this is what I've been doing here at Salesforce, but like scalable demo environments, like, you got to get there fast. And, it's kind of an amazing time right now because we built that from scratch, over 16 years ago here at Salesforce. And now there's companies out there that have products off the shelf that help you do that. The sponsor of today, DemoStack, right? Great example. And so my mind is just blown of like something that I've like made a career out of. Like, there's products now that you can just go buy and do. So kind of just blown away.
It's a great point. And there's actually a lot of tools out there, but the demo is the backbone of what we do. So much of what we do. And then what are some of the metrics? I mean, because when you're trying to spin up an SE and help them get comfortable and get confident, what are some of the tools and what are some of the metrics that you put in place to actually get these SEs up and running and then ramp them up as they're going along?
Todd, you take that? You want to go?
Go for it.
Yeah. So when you're onboarding and ramping in SE, it's so, and I'll go back to, I'll take one step back further as something, a precursor to this, Lara and Todd. So we've talked about the pillars and the foundation and what that means. And then I go one level below and I start breaking it out into, I forget who it was earlier today, mentioned the 3 Ps. I think it was people, process, product. I look at four four components of all my organizations. Number one is people, of course. Number two is internal, that's process. Number three is external, that's customer. And the fourth one is product. And when we're talking about ramping people, that falls into the people category, right? So you've got to look at the roles and understanding as you're onboarding them, what you have in place to help them with it, whether or not that is enablement programs, it's hands-on work, it's certifications. I actually believe in certifications that help them accelerate quickly through that program. So I have 3 core certifications that all SEs need to compete within the first 9 months, and they're dedicated to 3 different areas. One is actually happens to be related to the sales process. Get them understanding the process by which we're using and running our sales cycles. Number 2 is actually about the platform and the products. So we have 5 core areas of our platforms. I have minor certifications in all those. And then the third one is around the actual day-to-day activities, demo styles, presentation, et cetera, things of that. So having things in place, and you don't want to make it, certainly don't want to make it burdensome, right? Because the last thing you want to do is have somebody come onto the team, they're trying to get their feet underneath them, and they're overwhelmed with 45 days of nonstop enablement. And that's, you're going to lose somebody pretty fast if you do that. So keep it light, keep it focused, and keep it targeted.
Yeah, I might take it back to the demo because it's such a core part of what we do. But someone once asked me, like, hey, how do you measure which demo environments are kind of contributing to the revenue? Right. And, we've done a pretty good job of tracking that here at Salesforce. And just know that at some point, all your demo environments are going to be tied to all your revenue, right? Like there's no other alternative, right? So that's going to happen. That's a foregone conclusion. I think a more interesting question is, what are your SEs or pre-sales professionals? What are they demoing inside those solutions? What are the SKUs? What are the features? And I say that because, if you're an SE leader, one of your greatest fears is the SEs that have been with you for a long time. Maybe they're not demoing the new stuff.
Yeah.
Right. They're kind of like stuck on the same old talk track. And with the new people, you kind of want to know, well, what are they gravitating towards? What are they doing? And then ultimately what you need to figure out is, okay, this is where the company's going and the revenue they're trying to drive for these products. Is that aligned to what we're showing? And is there a mismatch there? Because that's going to be a very key indicator of if you're missing revenue targets on certain product lines and people aren't showing it, it's going to be pretty obvious what's going on there.
Absolutely. It's crucial. And when you see companies, we're fortunate, we only have a 3-product line. So when our SEs are demoing, making sure that they are incorporating what's most recent, the latest, the greatest, but also not doing the harbor tour, right? Like the feature and focus and the sailing around and this and that, making it relevant, telling a story. We're big on that. But you just mentioned talking about, having how critical this is. I've seen companies in the past where they've actually had a team dedicated just to demo. I've seen it where they've had a team dedicated to just RFPs. When we're talking about building this foundation, what are the different types of structure that you've seen around or that you've experienced around building a different SE teams? How do you structure yours?
So one of the things that you've got to establish first and foremost, and if you don't have it, you have to understand activity that's occurring within your organization, where people are spending their time and what they're doing. And I break mine out. So if we go back to measurements and metrics and talk about that, my primary global dashboard has 20 different key KPIs on it. And I do an analysis, and anybody who's familiar with Salesforce or any CRM knows the importance and value of being able to track and associate calendar events into activities, right? I break it down and I do analysis of where they're spending their time and what they're working on. And then I ultimately understand what's really high value, right? And really what we can take a look at and what we can operationalize and what we can make repetitive. I do want to say something going back to Todd's comment about demos and the no harbor tour things, because this is something that irks me nonstop. If I ever hear of a harbor tour demo taking place, I'll come over the top on that opportunity and push it back, right? Because what we've done, and I'm blessed in the fact that just yesterday, and we worked on this for about 9 months, we revamped our go-to-market strategy and really broke it down into our solutions into use cases. What we've then subsequently done is take each one of those primary use cases from our customers, and we did this because the SEs in my organization were capturing use cases and opportunities so we could get a really good understanding of what our customers were doing with our products. We took those 8 primary use cases and took that 2-hour harbor tour demo, chopped it into 8 10-minute succinct use case oriented demos. And that's what we rewrote all our demo scripts around. So we've made it a whole lot easier to, if you understand the use cases of the customers, to really target them with information that's relevant to them, and also make it a whole lot easier for SEs to know what they're doing and what they're expected in each of those opportunities. So, so that I really wanted to go back to that harbor tour one because I hate harbor tours. No harbor tours. I actually had a button made for my team that had a boat on it in a harbor with a big X on it.
It's so true. And I love that you said that because it's something that we struggle with, but it's absolutely true. You just mentioned something. You said that you have 20 KPIs. And when we're talking about building a foundational team, do you, when you're establishing, bringing in new people, do you indoctrinate them? So is every person aware? And how do you measure that throughout your year, making sure that everyone's adhering and sticking to? And
that is all part of the transparency component. So if you're going to ask people to go through an additional behavior and additional activity of logging activities, it takes about an hour a week. It does. I understand. I let them know that that's part of their compensation. That's part of their job, right? And then they can see it effectively on those dashboards at a global level, and we can see the entire organization, how we're trending. And I break it down into 3 swim lanes in my dashboards. That's how I visualize it. One is related to ARR, to revenue. The other is to what I call high value SE activities. And those are POCs, workshops, custom demos, and understand where we've got trending, what opportunities are heading towards there. And last but not least, the third one is really around time and association. How much time is being spent customer facing? How much time is spent doing internal activities? Now, those metrics are going to be different for various size companies, right? If you're a startup with 15 SEs, there's really not going to be it's really not going to be easy to get a detailed look into that because they're going to be doing a lot of everything. They're going to be helping marketing. They're going to be helping enablement. They're going to be helping product. They're going to be doing all sorts of things. But once you get past, I'd say, around 40, 50 SEs in your organization, you can really start dialing it in and you can really start watching it and you can really start coaching behavior to where you need it to be. It also helps you, like Todd was saying, with that automation of, I call it the front end of the funnel, the top of the funnel, right? With those repeatable demos and the offerings, like from a lot of the partners here today, you can automate that, make it repeatable, digitize it and get it out there in your customer facing resources on your websites. Take that off the burden of your team and really have them focus on really the high value activities where they differentiate your solutions from your competitors.
So you've talked about a lot of tools that could be doing this. And Todd, I'm going to take this over to you, especially because of your background in being at Salesforce. What are some of the tools? Because it seems to me, especially when you're talking about automating, there are a lot of different tools out there that can help with our SE processes from day to day. What are some of the ones that you found most beneficial and useful?
Yeah, so a lot of the past was just helping our internal SEs again, like start halfway up the mountain instead of from the valley floor. So clicking a few buttons and getting a highly personalized demo that's relevant to an industry or segment or a region in the world. And then adding on top of that demo environment, tools that would localize language. Oh, we're dealing with a company that deals in tens of millions and billions of dollars. Okay, let's make sure all the opportunities are in those amounts instead of in like pennies. And so, kind of all these tools, in the internal tools we built, have been around how fast can we personalize the demo? And so an SE spends minutes, but the customer thinks they spent days, right? Almost to the point where they're like, "Is that our data?" Like that is like the ultimate compliment if you're an SE. But I think so that's kind of internal table stakes. There's tools like DemoStack, who's sponsoring today, and Consensus. And John, you were just kind of alluding to this of how do we pull things a little further through the funnel and actually allow our customer or prospect to do some self-service there. So I posted something on LinkedIn. I didn't think it would get this crazy of a reaction, but it was, time to replace the button on your website that says request a demo. that button is code word for I want to be harassed by someone for the next year that knows nothing about the product. And so with some of these tools, that button should probably read something like "Send me the demo."
Yeah.
Where you click it and then it comes to your inbox. And like I wrote that post at 9:30 last night, and that's when I was actually doing some research on products. I didn't want to talk to someone in sales. I was doing some research by myself, and so that button is always on. It's always selling. And I think, COVID has really accelerated this, right? The buyer has changed. And there's a lot of people, especially as I look at Gen Z, they're not going to click on that button.
The irony,
I might, but Gen Z is not going to click that button.
The irony here, team, is I actually made a comment on Todd's post, and somebody reached out to me and asked me if I wanted a demo.
Send it to me.
I think what we need to do is make a TikTok video, make them short little snippets, that people can ingest and then move on to the next one.
It's fascinating to me right now because we've been in this industry so long and have now seen like our profession. And we talked about this earlier in the week, right? Pre-sales, sales engineering. It goes back to what we've seen from buying motions change over the past few years, right? That front end of what was the traditional sales cycle, it's almost gone because buyers are coming to the table educated and at least believing they're very educated on what they want out of their solutions, right? And so that accelerates through what used to be the qualification, the discovery from that was traditionally done by the AEs before the handoff of a qualified opportunity came over to sales engineers. Customers are thinking they're already there and ready to be handed over to our teams. And so our sales cycles usually sometimes even start with a first meeting with a request for a POC. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. You want to do, okay, well, let's do some advanced technical discovery here to see if this is even possible. But so the only way you can actually make sure they're getting the right messages out there is by going with kind of like the solutions Todd's been talking about, the automation, the digitization of your use cases and your demos. So you got to get out there and you got to do it.
Giving your team a focused approach with those use cases is huge. And it's a great way. It's also a great way to guide your customer, right? Because you're giving them a consultative approach. Hey, this is what we've seen our customers do. This is what we've seen them do successfully. Here's how you want to do it. So it gives them a path and lets them know that you're the experts, right? You're the knowledgeable ones, which is interesting. How do you all handle, and this is not a question we've talked about, but how do you all handle change? Because there's so much change. And I mean, change in the product, change in the team, change in the company. It's a hard thing, especially when you're talking about this foundational building. Change is something we all have to adjust to on a regular basis. How do you handle that?
I have a great quote for this one. So the most dangerous phrase in the language is "we've always done it this way," right? Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, right? Change is inevitable. Todd and I actually grew up together at Salesforce, where the only thing that was guaranteed and was certain was change. So change is, you gotta get people to realize that change isn't a bad thing. Actually, change is what accelerates growth and allows for growth. If you don't change, you become stagnant. You become that rock that's growing moss on it instead of the one that's getting shiny. So change, you've got to get that perception spread amongst your team that change is positive. You've also got to get them used to it. And that can be probably the most difficult thing. And once they're used to it, it's just expected. Territories, I lived in a world where it was guaranteed territories were going to change every year. Luckily, we fought and kept the SEs on most of the same accounts because they were the trusted advisors. But the new salespeople are in and out like in a rotating door. So you gotta get your teams to understand that change is okay. Change is actually a positive thing, and not to fear it. That's probably the most important message I've got there.
And then I'd probably say you have to innovate, which I think leads into Todd, what your team does. This whole Q branch is such a cool team.
Yeah, a few questions back, you talked about specializing functions for like RFP and things like that. And that's essentially what Q branch is, right? It's like, okay, SEs hate coding and that's really time consuming. Okay, let's have a team that just does that. Keep the SE in front of the customer. RFPs, a lot of people don't like those either. Okay, we should have a team that does that. Keep the SE in front of the customer. And so what we've essentially done is just augment the skill set. We haven't augmented staff. Like some people are like, oh, Q branch, like you have a bunch more people to build demos. It's like, no, like if you have a bunch of people to build demos, you're going to build a lot of demos. It's not necessarily a good thing. So it's really about staff augmentation, keeping SEs in front of customers because that's where they're adding the value. And yeah, I mean, it's looking back on it a bit. One thing I'm really proud of is, the aperture of candidates you used to be able to find for the SE profession would be pretty narrow. And when you start taking off some of those things off the job description, must code, must have a CS degree, you can hire a much more diverse candidate pool. And so I think, that's another reason to maybe think about a scale team like this is it frees you up a bit.
Absolutely. And it's funny. I when I see SEs, I think of a pendulum kind of swinging back and forth. And I think, between the technical side and the softer skill side, right, and the sales side, and developing both sides of those is really important when you're building that foundation and incorporating that. You had a really cool quote that you talked about, Todd, from Peter Cohen that you had mentioned in your brief.
Yeah. See if I can on the spot remember it, but it was basically the job of pre-sales is to secure the win with the kind of least expensive form of proof possible, or something along those lines. And I love that quote because I think sometimes we get wrapped up in like, is it the POC? Is it the demo? And we're the demo team, and we're that's what we do. And I think if we keep sight of that, there's a lot of different ways to achieve that. And I think we have to always keep open-minded to that because, so often we're just associated with the demo, and there's probably a lot better ways to do it.
Yeah, I think early in the week, I think actually James had a quote out there on LinkedIn. Is like, if your sales engineering team is just demoing, you're doing it wrong. And I absolutely agree with that. I've always been a proponent of whenever there is sales training, whether it's value selling, whatever sales motions you're going through, SEs and AEs are going through it together as a team. Because when you've got two inherently different animals with an SE and an AE, right? There's two different paths, two different personas where we tend to gravitate in our careers. But when they're paired together and they're working as a team, it is a synergistic relationship. It becomes the sum of those two becomes greater than two. It's 3, 5, 6, et cetera, whatever. So you've got to have them because it's a different set of eyes and a different set of perspectives that can add to what that AE is seeing. So bringing them into conversations rather than just having them demo will often do two things to your deals for your AEs. And you got to get them to understand this. One, they love this. Actually, they love both of them. It's going to shorten the cycle. Number two, the SE is also going to bring in a different perspective, potentially see additional solutions, and it's going to raise the amplitude. So shortening, and it's a win-win for everybody. Push the SEs up in the sales cycle. I actually came to an organization where SEs weren't being engaged until 40% of the sales process was done. I changed that. Now we are actually participating in qualification and discovery. And yeah, it's additional work up front for the SEs. It comes to that perception, but the better they know the opportunity, the more succinct that demo is going to be delivered and the less time it is in trailing. So your stage 4 and your stage 5, whatever your sales cycle is like, is going to shrink. So all sorts of benefits into having that synergy.
100%. I absolutely agree. And I was going to say, Todd, we're getting ready to end here, but I'll give you the last word. Just any other thoughts on this, what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I said this in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, but when it does come to the demo, right? Like, I think yes, we own that, right? No one would ever take that away from us. But one thing we need to think about is the digital demo. I don't know that we quite own that yet. And if we don't stake our claim on it, some other department might. So we need to think about a profession outside of live demo with customers. We were talking about some of these tools earlier. How do we scale that? Where's the always on sales motion? The send me the demo button. We got to own that because, I don't know any other group that is charged with progressing deals through the pipe. That's us, right? And some people are like, well, why wouldn't you leave that to marketing? It's like, last time I checked, it's not marketing's job to progress the deals through the pipe, through the funnel. That's our job.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for your time. And I see James here. Pop it up. So
I'm here. Yeah. Wow. What a wonderful discussion. Lara, thanks for leading a great discussion. John and Todd, really appreciate the conversation. Appreciate the insights. We've got a great conversation happening in Slack right now too. As we talked about before, we wanted this conversation to continue the conversation. And I think we did just that. So thank you three so much for your time and for your energy. Appreciate you joining us on the Exec Summit.